Hello, I'm Claire and I'm here to help you get better at dancing. Yes, today applies to all forms of dancing. It's about travel and spatial awareness. When you're on stage, you're not just standing in one spot and doing a dance on that spot. Yes, 9 times out of 10, you'll be moving from one side of the stage to the other. You'll be using the floor, you'll be using the air, you'll be making the most of that three-dimensional space that you have in which to dance. And a good choreographer will have really encompassed everything to make the most of that space, and maybe even show like a formation traveling or use that movement to tell their story. So there are lots of things that come into play with this. So if you're really focused on the way you move within your space and the way you travel within your space, then it really helps. And obviously it's important to make the most of that space. I remember during COVID, we had I had this space. This was my teaching space. So literally, and all my dancers had a similar space. They had 2 meters square maximum in which to dance. And I adapted my choreography accordingly so we could really make the most of that space. If I did something that traveled forward, I would then choreograph something that came backwards so that we stayed within our little squares. And it kind of worked, it helped, and made us all very aware of our space. Obviously, when we then came into the studio, we had to kind of do, it's a bit like when you have one of those little, it's like a toy or something where you put water on it, it goes whoop, and suddenly expands into this beautiful flower. And so it's a bit like that. We came into the studio and suddenly we had to stretch everything out to fill the space we now had. And really you do want to make the most of what space you have available to you. So I have a few tips. And these are to do with stagecraft and to do with dancing in general. So thinking about how you can really make the most of that space and make your dancing fill the room. And that makes you appear bigger, and that makes you stand out to the audience, which makes them want to watch you. And that's all part of it. Not about upstaging other people in the number, but about making the whole number enthralling for the audience, and everybody's using the same principles that look amazing. And when you've got formations in dance, it's really important that you really stick to those patterns. There's an amazing choreographer, Busby Barkley, who's one of my, I won't say heroes, but he is kind of. He actually came from a military background, and he used the theory that he learned in his military background in the marching formations, and he used that theory in these amazing kaleidoscopic images that he created with his hundreds of dancers, all often filmed from above, all opening out flowers and things like that, and cannons, and just amazing. And again, that's the use of space, because the movement draws your eye, say along a diagonal, for example. So a few little tips regarding stagecraft and how you can make the most of your space when you're dancing. First of all, if you're meant to travel, make sure you do. I know that sounds really obvious, but use your plie, bend your knees and push through the floor. Yes, use your feet, use your legs to glide and slide along the floor so you do travel forwards. Yeah, if you're meant to be really aware of every step, is it meant to travel upwards or is it meant to travel along? Yeah, and that way you'll get used to being able to make the most of those traveling sequences that travel along the space, but not so much that you travel when you're meant to be going upwards. Yeah, for example, if you do a posé ton levé, yeah, step up in arabesque jump, and if you travel that too far forwards, you might actually run out of space and lose some of the impact of that leap or that jump. It's more of a jump than a leap. Yeah, whereas a jeté leaps forward and travels forward. So you want to be thinking with each movement, does this travel just up and down, or does this travel sideways, or which direction does it travel? So be really aware of that. Even when you're learning little sequences, say petit allegro, yeah, little jumps, that is meant to stay on the spot, yes. And you'll be surprised actually how much we do move when we're doing that. So really finding a focus in front of you, holding that core, so when you do jump, you're jumping absolutely vertical, you're not letting your body fall forward or back. That will really help you with that as well. So moving on to sequences that are traveling in a specific floor pattern. So circles, first of all, we start this really early doors with little ones, and I tell them right from day one, The trick to make your circle stay in a circle and stay a nice big circle is actually to do it as a square, okay? So if you're traveling around the room, I won't use this room as a shape because it'll be really confusing. So you travel right as far as you can, and then you turn a corner, and you travel all the way as far as you can that way. Then you turn another corner, travel as far as you can that way, and so on. Yeah, so you're really going right to the corners. Follow the edges of your dance space, and that will help you make sure that your circle stays large. If you follow the dancer in front of you and you cut the corners, basically, literally it happens every time, especially when people don't know it for the first time. Literally we end up in a little bundle with all the dancers like really close together in a circle in the middle. And obviously we would completely run out of space. And also following that line actually helps you keep your line in alignment so that you're not twisting your hips or going all wonky, or certainly, for example, if you're doing gallops, if you're doing forward gallops, you want your hips and shoulders to be facing that wall as you're galloping towards it, rather than kind of slightly going sideways if you're thinking of going around the circle. So it helps you keep track of the step you're doing in the line of that step as well, and it helps you keep that circle. So if you're doing a turning sequence going around the room, you may have seen a pas de deux or something, or a couple dance where they'll each do a solo, and then the guy will go around the room doing leaps and turns, and then the girl will go around the room or around the space doing leaps and turns. That gets really confusing if you do it as a circle. If you do it as a square, you can focus on that side of the wall and do your turns that way, and then focus there and do your turns there. So you've got that focus, you've got something to focus on and a direct line of travel. It makes it so much easier. So that's circles. Then we have diagonal lines. Okay, there are two types of diagonal line that you'll travel on as a dancer at any point. Most obviously, you have the corner to corner. So you might be starting right up in one corner and you're going to go doo, 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 right towards the other corner, maybe doing leaps, it might be doing turns, and literally you look at the corner and you leap towards that corner. Obviously, if you're leaping, you look up to help your jumps go higher. And if you're turning, you use a technique called spotting, where you leave your head behind and bring it round again. I'll talk about that another day. Anyway, so if you're traveling on a diagonal, you focus where you're going and you go from one corner of the space, the studio, the stage, whatever your space you're in, to the other. And that's quite relatively easy, okay? Then we have a diagonal where you might go on diagonal for part of the sequence, and then you turn the corner and then you take another diagonal, okay? Now, this is a tricky one because instinctively, when we're traveling on diagonal, we want to go corner to corner. But if you do that, you then end up going sideways across the front. So if you do your first diagonal to the corner, you end up having to go just across the front sideways, which is not necessarily the best look, okay? So you want to be doing a diagonal each way. So if you're doing a diagonal that changes directions, and this happens, I'm sure in other syllabi it happens as well, but in RAD it happens pretty much every grade. There will be one exercise that travels along and then changes in diagonal and then changes diagonal, yes? And it's a really good way of getting people to be really aware of when they're doing a movement like that, to make sure that both lines are actually diagonal. You're basically doing a V shape. So what you would do is you'd head for the middle of the opposite wall, not the corner. You head for the middle of that opposite wall, yabba-dabba-da, and then you turn the corner, then you head for the corner. Yeah. And that way you've made a beautiful diagonal in both directions, and it looks fab, and you don't end up dancing sideways to the audience, which isn't ideal, unless it's obviously been choreographed to do something but that's just traveling straight across the room. There's also another form of diagonal movement. Say, for example, if you were doing an adage or a petit allegro as a solo in the middle of the space, and if I was to move on diagonal in that moment, I wouldn't necessarily go to the corner of the studio. This is all to do with line and alignment, which I discussed before, where you don't want to lose your back leg. You want to be, imagine you're in a box, yes? So in that instance, you're going to travel towards your personal diagonal, yes? It might be you're doing a pas de bray, or might be doing something traveling there, and then you might travel there, yes? So again, if you're doing something within the central space, you then use your personal diagonal rather than traveling towards the corner of the studio, because you'll end up traveling like that which again loses that lovely line that we've worked really hard to create and create this lovely image with our limbs, okay? And then my final tip to you is, if you're doing it, I would do this for every exercise in the centre personally. If I was doing an exam, I would go through each exercise and think, okay, what's the floor pattern that this exercise is creating? And it will really help you. Okay, actually, I've thought of another idea on top of this as well. Mapping out that floor pattern, and actually getting a piece of paper and going, right, I start here, I go along to there, I go along to there, I do this, I do. So you really know the exact floor pattern you're making will really help you make sure that your sequences travel in the right direction, and also make the most of that space. So you don't find yourself just dancing on the spot and not really using the whole of the area. My other tip that I just thought of is make use of the width of your space. Yes, quite often, if you've got to run around in a circle, I notice this a lot when I'm teaching, the dancers will run around, almost on the spot, and get back into the centre in the circle, ready to do their next bit. And they often arrive there a little bit early, and it's a bit of a eggy moment as they wait there for their cue for the next bit. Okay, make use of the width of that space. So really travel out to the side. Sometimes if you want to really make those runs travel, you want to give yourself as much space as possible to travel, so you can show your ability of traveling, getting down into that plie and using the stretch of your legs. So make use, you might even have to travel forward a bit, then out to the side, go right as far as you can to the side without crashing into the wall, and then use the depth of the room, because if you end up slightly upstage centre, that's not bad, yes? It's giving you that chance to give that lovely sweeping run or whatever movement it is that's taking you around that space. So really use the width, really expand your movement. So take in that space and make it yours, especially in the solo movements, especially if you're doing like a grand allegro and it's your solo moment. Make the most of that grand allegro, show those lovely big leaps and make it travel. And make sure, if you are in a limited space, make sure that the bits that are really meant to travel, you really travel those, and then make sure that the other elements are really vertical or on the spot so that you don't overuse that space. So take that time to really map it all out as well, and make use of the width of your space and the depth of your space as well. I have one more as well. If you're choreographing something, so this helps for everybody, yeah. So if you're choreographing something, really think about the space as well. Yeah, think about why you're going to that in that direction. So think, well, what is the story I'm telling with this piece of choreography? What is the meaning behind it? But also, so you wouldn't necessarily go, oh, there, and then we're going to go over there, then we're going to come back here for no apparent reason. But think about the space that you're creating, or the three-dimensional, imagine like a three-dimensional sculpture that you're creating with your choreography. Make sure you do use the space. You don't necessarily have to use every single corner of the stage, but make sure you make good use of it. So the first time I taught some, I think they were grade 2s, and I gave them a chance to choreograph their own pieces, and it was actually quite sweet. They literally did everything side to side, literally the whole number was side to side. And that's because they hadn't really thought about, obviously I intervened and said, well, have you thought about diagonals or running forwards? And they were, oh yeah. So think about the shapes you're creating on the floor, the space, the areas that you are using within your space. Also think about your three-dimensional space, yes? I know ballet is not technically floor orientated, but neoclassical is, yeah, and a lot of the exercise, certainly in the RAD syllabus, a lot of the exercises in the modern syllabus include a little bit of floor work. So use that floor, use different levels, make sure you've got some height, make sure you use some depth, make sure you use the whole space. I think that's it for today. Okay. So lovely to speak to you. I hope my tips are really helping you. Please subscribe and do ask questions as well. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you become a better dancer. And if you have a question, pop a comment below and I'll see the comment and I will help you out. If you like the channel, please subscribe, share with your friends so that we can all rise together, and see you soon. Oh, if you want to dance with me, you can join me to pop along to bridgeballet.co.uk and book yourself a class. If you can't dance with me live, you might be on the other side of the world, and 10 o'clock in England is like midnight in Australia. So please, join the bridgeballet.club and you can dance, not live, but you can still enjoy my classes there. Okay, see you later.